In this video, entitled stranger at a campground expects me to have a shirt for her kid to tie-dye, throws world-class tantrum when I don't. It finally happened. Entitled parents demand my print. And cut my salary in half, kiss your business goodbye. Entitled stranger at a campground expects me to have a shirt for her kid to tie-dye, throws world-class tantrum when I don't. So, my boyfriend and I went camping this weekend at a campground, and we met this couple with their son, maybe 7 to 11 years old. I don't know, I'm bad at telling kids' ages. While we were setting up our tent, they were setting up at the plot next to ours. We had some polite small talk, and we mentioned that we bought a tie-dye kit to tie-dye a couple t-shirts while we were there. It was really just a small, cheap tie-dye kit, and we both brought 2 shirts to make. The mother immediately got excited and said her son would love to tie-dye with us later that night. We were caught off guard, but I was sure there'd be some extra dye and didn't really care that much, so I said sure. A few hours of hiking and fishing go by, and then we're ready to go back and settle into our campsite, eat dinner, and start making our t-shirts. We round the corner towards camp, and it was as if this kid was waiting for us. He was right at the path and then sprinted back to his campsite. Once we got closer, his mother stomped over to the trail, and this is how this conversation went. EM, where have you guys been? We've waited hours. Me, we've been hiking, but he can come use it in a little bit once we set it up. I was totally caught off guard and turned off that she even approached me that way, but I blew it off again. Like, did this lady expect me to alter my plans all day to cater to her kid? We get to our campsite and I'm about to start dinner, but this woman and her kid are just staring at us. So I decide to just get the dye ready so he can bring his stupid t-shirt over and leave us alone so we can eat in peace. I bring the dye out and they come over to our table, empty-handed. EM, looks great. He's a small or a medium. Me, what? I don't have anything for him to use. I thought you had your own t-shirt that you wanted to dye. EM, no. You are the ones who brought the tie-dye kit. We waited all day for you to get back, and now you're saying you don't even have a t-shirt for him? Me, I don't know what to tell you. We only have 4 t-shirts to make for ourselves. EM, I can't believe you told my son that he could tie-dye and got his hopes up. He waited for you all day. Can he have one of yours? Me, absolutely not, I said while laughing. EM, it's not funny. Don't laugh at me. At that point, I'm just like, whatever, lady, and we keep snickering at her until they storm back to their campsite, where she starts playing literal death metal music full blast. It's hilarious. This chick was insane, throwing a full-blown tantrum and glaring at us from afar. An hour or so later, the ranger comes over to our tent and said he got a report that we were drinking alcohol. We were drinking alcohol, but they typically don't care unless you're disturbing other campers, and we were just 2 people sitting and eating dinner quietly. I told him what happened and he thought it was hilarious, and I jokingly said that I'd like to make a counter report about EM's music. He was like, hell yeah, I'll do that, and went over to her. She threw a fit when he told her to turn that shit down, and I heard her screaming about how we're partying and drinking and how dare he confront her and not us. Eventually, her husband turned her music off while she was mid-screech. Then she sulked into her tent and never came back out. The ranger came back over to our site for a beer after dark. We considered calling her poor husband over for a beer too, but decided not to poke the bear. It finally happened. Entitled parents demand my print. Honestly, I've never ran into a Karen or entitled person before, but I finally had my run-in today with an entitled young couple. On with the story. So, I bought a nice print made by an artist located in Georgia, USA, a couple months ago, and have finally gotten it framed properly by Hobby Lobby. I like their services, and since this was my first piece of artwork that wasn't some $10 poster, I wanted to go all out and make it look nice. However, a half hour ago, I went in to pick it up and it turned out beautifully, but there was another young couple sort of lurking around the pictures and framing area of the store, and I could see them looking at me and my now new print, which was being bagged by the very nice framing lady. Honestly, Hobby Lobby, your employees are sweet and helpful. As it was being bagged, they approached and looked at my print, commenting how nice it was and where I got it, etc. Being an introvert, but also enjoying conversation, I told them my little tale about how I got it and they thanked me. All is well, right? Wrong. A few minutes later, the framing lady got called elsewhere and left me in my framed print with a half-finished receipt. So I waited and hopped on my phone to answer some emails and texts from work. I work from home sometimes. But as I looked up, there was the entitled wife, EF, picking up my print with entitled husband, EH, standing behind her, marveling at it. Me. Hey, could y'all please put my print down? This was a lot of money to do and it's my first piece of artwork ever. EW. Oh, hush. I'm just looking at it. I'm not hurting it now, am I? Me. Yeah, you are. You could potentially break the backing, which is just paper, and then I'd have to get it fixed, and I don't have all day to be here. Please, put my property down. EH stands between us. Look, kid, we want this painting, and we just got married 6 months ago and could really use something nice to go in our bedroom to commemorate our 6-month anniversary. Me. It's not for sale, sir. I don't want to have to go back to Georgia to buy a new one. Find the artist yourself. I gave you his net. EW. I don't care. You bought it before, you can buy it again. At this point, she was causing a scene and EH was constantly blocking my way to save my precious print. Then finally, At this point, she was causing a scene and EH was constantly blocking my way to save my precious print. Then, finally, the nice lady, NL, at Hobby Lobby came back. NL. Excuse me. That's his. EH. No, he stole it from us and is trying to claim it's his. We found this here in the store first and he just wants it for himself. EW. Yeah, we found it a few aisles down. Me. They're lying. You know I came in here 2 weeks ago for the print, ma'am. The NL then looked at me and nods with a smirk. NL. So you two claim that you found this in my store, correct? The couple almost in unison. Yep. NL. Well, then you know that we don't sell anything with an artist's signature. But if you really do claim it's yours, then what's the artist's name? Neither of them could give an answer. Then I chime in and give the right one. Sorry, I'm not going to advertise the artist's name out of respect to him. Then the NL simply told both of them to leave the store immediately or else she would have them trespassed. And since it was in a strip mall area, that means they would have been trespassed from the entire mall area. Sadly, they didn't escalate it like most stories, but it was nice to see some very entitled people get their just desserts. Cut my salary in half? Kiss your business goodbye. The cast. Me. Chad, hiring CTO. Richard, CEO, brother of Chad. Big Bro, engineer coworker. Eddie, IT and desktop support guy. This takes place near the very beginning of my software engineering career back in 05 or 06. I'd just been let go from my previous place of employment due to being compliant with directives I'd been given, although not maliciously, so that story wouldn't be appropriate here, sadly, and thus working myself out of a job. I was a young college dropout from a technical college that hadn't been federally accredited yet, and thus all my student loans were from banks and loan companies instead of from Uncle Sam, and debts were due. I was also making payments on my very first car, even though it was a beater that the prior owners had already driven into the ground, 4 years old and nearly 200k miles on it when I got it, and of course rent and utilities. The job I'd just been let go from already had me working paycheck to paycheck as they paid far under average rate, but I was still new, professional, so I couldn't be very choosy. I was living in Los Angeles County, so the cost of living was so bad. I was having to choose which bills were going to be late on a monthly basis. Specifically, I was living in a town called San Pedro, a small town tucked fairly out of the way. After blasting my resume to all the job boards, I get a call from a startup who seems interested in my resume and wants me to come in for a face-to-face interview, skipping the call screen entirely. In my desperation, I agree. I'm given an address which is all the way up in Woodland Hills. I check the internet. 55-minute drive, so long as there's no traffic. With traffic, it looks like the commute will be more like an hour and 45 minutes each way. I'm desperate though, and literally nobody else has reached out to me about my resume or responded to my application, so I go to the interview. I arrive to an almost empty office complex, maybe 6 or 7 other cars in a parking lot capable of holding at least 50. I go into the building mentioned in the address and call the number I was given to let them know I've arrived. Enter Chad. Chad comes to meet me and seems excited that I've come. He escorts me through the building to an office. Mind you, as far as I can see, we're the only 2 humans in the building. He gives me the pitch for the company, tells me he built the software being sold, but it's not scalable and needs someone who can rewrite it. After we go through the whole interview, song and dance, he offers me the job on the spot. The pay is marginally higher than the last gig, so I figured gas would be covered for the commute. I agree, and we shake hands as I'm gonna be starting the next Monday. Red flags start appearing from the first minute I arrive on Monday. First, I'm given a tour, which consists of the 14 by 14 foot office I'm going to be sharing with Chad, as well as another engineer who's going to be starting the following Monday. I'm not a fan of having someone else able to look over my shoulder. It makes me nervous. I ask why each engineer's desk has two computers, because the one you'll be writing code on doesn't have internet access for security purposes. Note, this was pure paranoia. There was nothing about this software that required such tight security. We weren't doing any government contracts or anything of the sort. Then, I'm escorted clear across the building to meet with the CEO, Richard, the IT guy, Eddie, and the sales/support team. I'm told that half of the team is supporting an existing version of the application. 2 people are selling the existing version to new clients or trying to, and 1 person is explicitly tasked with selling the new version, the one I haven't even started on yet. I'm still young and dumb at this point, but even I know this means the salesperson is probably giving out a date when the customer should expect their purchase to be filled. It's a good thing you started when you did. We've been telling customers it'll be ready in June. Did I mention all this was happening in February? Apparently, I've agreed to rewrite, test, and package an entire application I've never seen before in approximately 4 months. So, tour being done, I sit down and get to work. After jumping through a bunch of hoops of getting the software, I prefer downloaded onto the actual work machine as well as the code. I set about reviewing code so horrific I've not seen its like since, and there isn't a single comment in the entire thing. Before I can ask a single question of the CTO, however, he tells me he's headed to downtown LA to scalp his tickets to the Lakers game and that he'll see me tomorrow. So now I'm alone in the office with this abomination, a machine that's been humstrung to heck and back, and the only thing I've got to console me is the fact that at least I'm employed again. Fast forward a week. I've documented the bulk of the code because there wasn't any, and the boss and I do not get along. He's mad because I've not written any substantial code, and I'm frustrated because I'm trying to understand a lot of what specific code is trying to do, and he's routinely leaving around noon to go sell his tickets for Lakers games, or just not in the office because he's chatting with someone else. When he's in the office, I show him my documentation and try to get him to verify it or describe the purpose of code where all I can say is what? By the end of the week, I've covered about 30% of the project in a wiki-like document, and I've taken to leaving after sunset so I can A, get more done, B, have a shorter commute, and C, drive when my car isn't an oven. The AC didn't work. I've barely managed to convince the CTO that what I'm doing is necessary so the engineers starting the next Monday doesn't have to do anywhere near the same crap I've got, which would make us a more efficient team. Monday arrives and in comes Big Bro. I call him this because he was a much more experienced engineer than I was. We spend the first day with him getting set up, then us reviewing what I've documented. He manages to answer some questions the CTO never did, just because he's that much better, and I start to feel more confident. Over the next weeks, Big Bro took me under his wing as an engineer, teaching me best practices, standards, and where my plans were good and where they could be better. If it hadn't been for him, I'd have gone insane. I end up joining him outside for smoke breaks even though I don't smoke, just so I can get a breath of non-office air. He and I discuss the project, and we also make friends with Eddie, who makes us laugh by telling us horror stories about the CTO and CEO. Apparently he was a school friend of theirs and basically worked with them because they paid him to do something he felt was super easy. April rolls around. I've got a special occasion I need the day off for, which happens to be a Wednesday that year. I'd advised him when I first started, and he'd been cool with it. I remind him on April 2nd, since I had an irrational fear of policy decisions being made on April Fool's Day, and he loses it. He goes off on a rant and straight up informs me that he regrets hiring me, claiming I didn't have the skills I told him I did and wasn't worth what I was being paid. We're definitely not halfway done, more like 1/3, and it's already been decided that June is a lost cause and what we're shooting for is August now. That habit I started before, or leaving after the sun went down, Yeah, that never stopped. I was arriving at 9 a.m. every day and leaving around 10 p.m. every night, trying my best. Big Bro was the same, and Eddie would stay late with us just because we liked hanging out together. So, it should be understandable that I was very close to losing it right back at him. In a strained yet diplomatic voice, I told him that if he put in the same amount of work to help us as we put in to rewrite his code, we'd probably be a lot closer to done than we were, especially given the 12-hour days. He was not a fan of that and switched to straight up yelling, blaming us for the lost sales and refunds due to the delays, and that the only way he'd get off our backs was by getting the project done. This entire time, Big Bro is just sitting there and says nothing to back me up. Chad then left the office for a bit, and I just declared I was taking my lunch and would be back in an hour. I felt frustrated by Chad and betrayed by Big Bro, who I felt, rightly or not, should have had my back since we were in the same boat. When we were both back in the office, he apologized for yelling and told me that since he agreed when I was hired I could have my day off. Cool, I apologized too, although not for anything specific. I just didn't want to talk to him anymore and figured that was the fastest way to end the conversation. Fast forward to June and the opportunity for malicious compliance. Over the last 2 months, Chad has been getting worse and worse. He's yelling nearly every day and still leaving early too. Big Bro and Eddie are also feeling the pain. Nobody is safe from his ego. The smoke breaks and afternoon/evening portion of our day are when we're most productive, as nobody can focus until Chad leaves. The first Monday in June rolls around and Chad invites me to go on a walk outside for a one-on-one meeting. I figured I'm being fired. At this point, we've had to refactor the rewrite almost entirely due to missing a critical chunk of functionality, and we're still only 60% done. August release is looking less and less sure. Chad informs me that he's hired a third engineer, but in order to stay in the budget to pay him, he's cutting my salary in half. I stop on the spot and just give him a blank look. Are you serious? I ask. I'm barely able to pay my bills and the gas required to commute here as it is. If you cut my salary at all, I won't be able to afford to live. At this point, the idea of cutting my productivity to help ramp up a new engineer so he can help us meet the deadline doesn't even occur to me, although in hindsight, that would have also been a pretty major issue. Chad brushes me off. That's not my problem. The fact that you missed one deadline and look like you're gonna miss another is. If you've got a problem with that, you're more than welcome to go find another job. The new guy starts in 2 weeks. And with that, he walks inside. I'd just been told that I had 2 weeks left of job at my current salary. Cool. So that day, I do something I hadn't done since I first started. I left while the sun was still up. Specifically, I left at 5 p.m. I drive my oven car, no working air conditioning in a car that had been left in the sun all day in Woodland Hills, had me feeling like a baked potato, through traffic, hour-and-a-half commute home through LA heat, and updated my resume before reactivating my accounts on all the job sites. I'm contacted the next day by a potential new employer, and I get an interview scheduled. I decide to tell Big Bro about the new opportunity, and he hits me with news that lets me know just how small a world we live in. Me. Hey, Big Bro, just for your information, I've started looking for a new job. I've already got an interview lined up. Big Bro, really? Where? Me, over at company. Big Bro, wow, that's where I worked before I came here. That place is pretty awesome, and I left there on pretty good terms. I know the CTO there. Go ahead and use me as a reference. Me, skeptical. Really? Okay. Turns out Big Bro was true to his word, and the CTO and I even talked about Big Bro during the interview. Apparently, they'd already talked about me, and Big Bro had been the ultimate hype man, confirming everything I said about why I was looking for a new job and everything. All goes well, and I'm electronically signing an offer letter that Friday afternoon. Chad had already left for the day, so there was nobody to look over my shoulder as I used the work computer that had internet access to get this done. At the job interview, the commute is cut by more than half and comes with a pretty significant raise. I tell Big Bro and Eddie on the last smoke break, I still don't smoke, that I'm done and I've found something new. Oddly enough, they both smile and just wish me luck. No hard feelings, hope we stay in touch. Odd, but I stopped really caring about anything related to that job, so I paid it no mind. I went back inside, packed up my stuff into my backpack, and walked to the CEO's office. Me. Hey, Richard, got a minute? Richard. Hey, OP, what's up? Me. Just want to let you know I found a new job, so I'm moving on. Richard. Really? Why? We need you. Me. You guys decided it was cool to cut my salary to a point where I couldn't afford to live. Chad said if I didn't like it, I should look for something new, so I did. Richard, looking defeated. Well, when's your last day? Me, today. Richard, now pissed. We need you here to train the new guy who starts soon. Me, hey, I had to train myself to an extent, big bro, when he first started. The new guy should be able to as well. And with that, I left for greener pastures. The unexpectedly huge fallout. 4 months later, Big Bro texts me to ask how things are going. I tell him things are great, and we schedule a lunchtime call because apparently things have gone sideways in a huge way. Part 1. Apparently, Chad came in on Monday almost violently angry and demands Eddie re-image my work machine first thing in the morning, which erases everything I'd left on there. Big Bro comes in an hour later and he and Chad discuss the new timeline for the project. Somewhere in there, apparently Big Bro asked Chad to log into the admin account on my old work machine so he can pull the documents I'd accumulated about the planned architecture, the existing code, meeting notes, etc. Chad answers by apparently punching a hole in the wall and leaving for the day, probably to go to the hospital to deal with his hand. At 10:30 in the morning, Big Bro then spends the rest of that week ostensibly working on recreating the documentation from scratch. Part 2. When I asked how the new guy handled the new documentation, Big Bro laughed and told me there never was any documentation. Apparently he and Eddie had become really good friends in the months we worked there, to the point where they become roommates about a month before I left. More than that though, they decided to start a freelance/consulting business together and only had to decide on when to make that their full-time jobs. Neither of them liked Chad much and wanted to make their departure hurt as much as possible. So they decide to make Big Bro's last day the day before the new guy starts, and Eddie would quit shortly afterward, sticking around just long enough to watch the bomb go off. Did I mention Big Bro never told Chad he was quitting? Yeah, he just didn't show up that Monday. He had, however, emailed that documentation he'd spent a week writing to Chad. Turns out he wasn't documenting the code at all. He'd spent a week writing a letter explaining in excruciating detail why Chad was such a bad boss, and he'd emailed it to everyone in the company. I asked if he still had it so I could read it, and he sent it to me after the call. Thankfully, like the big helper he was, Eddie had ensured that the new guy's email was set up in the proper groups before the email was sent, so the guy's first email in the company was an email about the kind of person he'd agreed to work for. Apparently, Chad thought it was appropriate to take his frustration out on the new guy, who'd already read a significant portion of the email before Chad shoved him away from his desk and deleted it. Apparently, new guy promptly decided, and rightfully so, that agreeing to work for Chad had been a mistake, packed up his things, and quit on the spot. Part 3. With the new guy quitting, the August deadline was now little more than a dream within a dream, which according to Eddie doesn't stop Chad and Richard from trying to find that miracle rockstar engineer who can save them from their own situation, which, given what they were offering as pay, didn't exist. So time advances in its unstoppable way. August arrives and customers find that they've paid for something that hasn't been delivered yet, and pretty much unanimously demand refunds, with a few customers bringing legal action against them. With the amount they have to refund and the money they now need for legal fees, they could no longer afford to pay anyone and were forced to shutter the business.